Welcome to this special Hanukkah episode of Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. What can be done to reinvigorate a holiday bogged down by its oily food, lackluster songs, kitschy candelabras, and problematic source material? How about a bit of family-friendly sci-fi fantasy and horror? I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Jewish Museum of the American West, and Atheists United Studios.
We're delighted to chat with Alex Shvartsman, an author, translator, and anthologist whose latest book is Dreidel of Dread, the Very Cthulhu Hanukkah board book. His other works include the fantasy novels Kakistocracy, The Middling Affliction, and Eridani's Crown. His short stories have appeared in Analog, Nature, Strange Horizons, and other publications. Alex, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Thanks so much for having me.
Dreidel of Dread isn't the first time you've used Jewish elements in a sci-fi or fantasy story. In your view, is there a natural affinity between Judaism and the fantastic?
I think so. I mean, we're called people of the book for a reason. And sometimes that book is speculative. If you look at some of the stories in the Talmud, if you look at a lot of the Jewish folklore, there is so many stories there that are essentially fantasy. And I think that, like most people with their cultures, we draw our inspiration from the stories we grew up with and kind of absorbed with the milk of the mother.
Speaking of how universal stories of fantasy, the supernatural, etc. are, as a genre, does it sometimes get pigeonholed and maybe isolated from that broader world literature? Because I think that fantasy is such a huge part of stories around the world across time that in our modern genreification, we sometimes lose sight of that.
I don't think that's really a big problem anymore. It used to be the case where you kind of got marginalized, and science fiction and fantasy and board games and things like that were all hobbies of the nerds, and were not popular. But for the past 30 years or so, we've seen tremendous strides. I mean, Marvel movies are some of the most popular entertainment, and they combine the elements of all of those genres. Science fiction and fantasy books are regularly making it onto the New York Times bestselling list. People are as likely to talk about Game of Thrones around the water cooler as they are to talk about, shows that are not speculative. So I'm very comfortable, having my nerd cred and bragging about it to people who are not, read in on the Comic-Con culture. So, I think those problems are probably behind us, thankfully.
So we've had a guest on the show named Matthew Klickstein, who's written the oral history of the San Diego Comic-Con. And there's a debate in that book between different founders of the convention asking if geek culture has sort of prevailed and, won the day in terms of popular culture, or if popular culture has co-opted geek culture and sort of taken some of the credibility out of those who might have formerly seen themselves with some pride as the outsiders. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's always an opportunity for people who derive some sort of satisfaction from that to be the outsiders, that you could still be edgy and you could still be kind of on the farther end of whatever community that you participate in, whether it's speculative or something else. But for the most part, I think it's the former. I think that people kind of get geek culture a lot more now. It's not embarrassing. People are not hiding the fact that they like Dungeons and Dragons or comic books or anything else that might take place at a Comic-Con. And I think we're all better off for it, frankly.
You've written that there are so many Christmas stories and so many nerdy gifts out there that make for wonderful stocking stuffers. But your options are far more limited when searching for a Hanukkah gift that will appeal to someone who loves science fiction, fantasy, horror books, and movies. Did you have your younger self in mind when writing Dreidel of Dread?
So I saw the need that could be filled. There are indeed so many different things that combine geek culture with Christmas. I mean, there are Doctor Who nerdy Christmas sweaters and all sorts of books and and T-shirts and mugs and whatever it is you want. So if you want to get somebody a holiday gift and you know that they happen to be, fans of nerdy, cool, like stuff like Firefly and Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever else, there are lots and lots and lots of ways of doing that. But there really aren't many options for Hanukkah. So I thought that, why not? Why not create something that would work for our community in the same way? Because clearly the demand is there, and people that have been showing this book, they're like, "Oh my God, I know exactly," and they start rattling off the names of people that this would be a perfect gift for. So I'm excited to see how well it actually does, and whether those people indeed enjoy receiving these as gifts.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe. Dreidel of Dread grew from your popular story explaining Cthulhu to Grandma. How did one thing lead to another?
I love when kind of fate intervenes and creates a story for you. I was chatting on Twitter, back when Twitter existed many moons ago, with some writer friends. And one of them, as an offhand comment, mentioned something along the lines of, "I'm having a difficult time explaining the concept of Cthulhu to my mother, or to my grandmother, rather." And I said, "Hey, explaining Cthulhu to grandma would make for a great title." And then the title just stuck with me. So after a couple of weeks, I followed up and I said, "Hey, are you going to use this title? Because if not, I think I will." And she said, "Go ahead." And so I wrote a funny story explaining Cthulhu to grandma, and that story is, to this day, my most successful short story. It won me an award. It's been translated into nearly 10 languages. It's I have a short story collection that shares that title at this point. It's helped me sell numerous other projects. So it's been very, very successful. After that story won an award and started getting attention, once again on Twitter, as a joke, I said, my next story is going to be called Dreidel of Dread, the Very Cthulhu Hanukkah. And people got a good laugh out of it. And then, again, that title just stuck with me, and it would not vacate some deep recess of my mind until I sat down and actually wrote that story. And initially, it was a short story. I did not write it as a book. I did not write it as a comic book or a picture book. It was just a very short story. I sold it to Mike Resnick, who is a Jewish science fiction writer and editor who is extremely well known in the science fiction community. And I sold it to him because I posted on Facebook that, hey, I wrote the story. And he reached out to me and said, hey, I must read it. Like that title, I just must read that title. So I sent him the file. He read the story, and like 5 minutes later, he goes, I'm buying this for my magazine. And so that story now had a life of its own, and kind of also got printed and reprinted a bunch of places, and often it gets reshared around the time of Hanukkah. And then I've always felt like this story would do really well in a comic book format. And I decided that, given all the anti-Jewish sentiments and all the stuff that we've been going through for the past year plus, 2024 was a really good year to do a project that was a wholesome and positive Jewish project. And so I thought that Dreidel of Dread would just be perfect as a board book. And so all of those ideas kind of combined. I found the right artist, kind of teamed up with the right people, and eventually this book was born.
Without giving too much away, what's your elevator pitch for this out-of-the-box Hanukkah tale?
So it's one of the worst questions that you can ask a writer, by the way. If you ask a writer to describe their book as few words as possible, you break us. Our brains stop working, because we've spent sometimes a year writing 100,000 words, and then an editor or a publisher or somebody goes, well, can you summarize it in 500 words? No, we cannot. So I will try my best, and this is what I came up with. I actually wrote that in advance, and I've been using it in some of our marketing, and it goes like this. Hanukkah Henry must face off against Cthulhu, prevent an apocalypse from starting during the Festival of Lights, and, most difficult of all, prove himself to his parents.
I think that sums it up pretty good.
Well, I'm glad it worked, but yeah, that's always the hardest thing for us to do is to take an idea that's X words and combine it into a lot fewer words.
When I was looking it over, and I realized that it was a board book, but it also has a lot of advanced concepts. I think family friendly is a pretty good way to describe it as well. Were you, aiming it at a particular audience, or were you aiming it at families?
So I took inspiration from Shrek in this regard. If you watch Shrek, it's definitely a movie that'll appeal to like 3 to 5-year-olds, but almost every single joke will fly over their heads. I mean, there's so many jokes that you have to really be an adult to get. So and this happens very often, right? Because people who make these movies are smart, and they know that it's the parents that pay to see the movie, and so the parent must be entertained as well, or they will not take their kid to see that movie. So they have to write the scripts so that they work on 2 different levels. They work on one level for the children, and children are entertained, but they work on a completely different level for adults. And what I tried to do with this book is to emulate that. And I tested it on a whole bunch of different subjects of different ages and different levels of experience with Judaism, different levels of experience with geeky concepts like Cthulhu in general. And by and large, I think it worked. And I hope that the readers will find that to be true as well.
There's a great part in the book when the protagonist, Hanukkah Henry Rabinowitz, is venting his frustration about the dearth of Hanukkah entertainment compared to the plentiful amusements for Christmas. He says, all Hanukkah has is that terrible Adam Sandler song. What makes that song so terrible?
I have to say, I've never been a huge fan of it. I feel like singing may not be one of the many, many, many talents that Adam Sandler has. But for the most part, it's frustrating that that's the song that kind of identifies Hanukkah. If you look at the number of iconic and beautiful Christmas songs that are written by Jewish composers and poets and writers, there's so many of them, and there isn't a single one like that for Hanukkah. And that's where that frustration was kind of coming from, because when people think Hanukkah song, this is what comes up, and I mean, it just sounds like a bad episode of Saturday Night Live.
Put on your yarmulke, here comes Hanukkah. So much funaka to celebrate Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the festival of lights. Instead of one day of presents, we have 8 crazy nights.
One other thing about that song that's just sort of irked me over the years is that, he's using all these Jewish celebrities, but he also makes errors. For instance, Rod Carew, the Hall of Fame baseball player, never converted to Judaism, but he is said to have done so in this song. And there's also, when he says all the Three Stooges, we know as Three Stooges fans that there were actually 6 Three Stooges and only 5 of them were Jewish. Anyway, it's like, even trying to do this very simple thing of Jew-hooing, of, naming Jewish celebrities and making us feel good that we have representation in the arts, he even screwed up there. So there's a lot to criticize about that song. I'm with you.
And that's actually the part that works for me, because in every and I love how you use Jew-hooing as a term, because there was, in fact, many, many decades ago, there was a website called Jewwho.com, and you went to that website to see if the celebrity was Jewish. So that's actually like this is like for the the olds can tell you young listeners about things like that back when the internet was slow. But I kind of feel like getting some of those wrong is something that would happen on that website as well. So that part may have been actually a meta joke. So I don't want to hold him responsible for that. Though you are welcome to, because I think a lot of other criticism still holds. But I just feel like we need better and more entertainment that ties, modern entertainment that ties to Hanukkah, and hopefully doesn't sound like that song.
I think the most important theme of Hanukkah is not light or oil or Maccabees, but celebrating Jewish identity at a time of tidings of comfort and joy, to quote one of the few Christmas songs not written by a Jew. Lovecraft, the creator of Cthulhu, was a notorious white supremacist and anti-Semite, in addition to being a brilliant author. You've written several other Lovecraftian humor stories. Was there anything intentionally subversive about inserting Lovecraft's character into a Hanukkah story?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the best way to deal with people like that who happen to become a part, for better or for worse, even if they're terrible people, they become a part of world culture and it cannot be removed. And we've seen this with Wagner, we've seen this with Dostoevsky, and now to a certain degree Lovecraft as well. So the best thing to deal with that is to subvert it and to create derivative works that are going to be created by and feature the sort of people that Lovecraft would have crossed the street to get away from. Plus, for someone like me who generally tends to write humor that makes fun of various pop culture things, the entire Lovecraftian mythos is just so kind of silly and easy to make fun of. At least for me it is, and I enjoy doing so. So I kind of, so I lean into that. And in fact, I've edited an entire anthology of short stories. It was called The Cackle of Cthulhu, so Lovecraftian humor short stories. And I intentionally invited lots and lots of authors who were people of color, who were gay, who were who were Jewish, or just people that Lovecraft would not have liked, and let them play in that sandbox.
Any letters from the Lovecraft estate, if there is such a thing?
Well, actually, the one thing that he did that he did well from the beginning is that he expressly allowed other people, even back when he was alive, to play with the setting. So essentially, he kind of released it into the public domain, even if that terminology may not have been used at the time. So it is perfectly okay for anybody to write in that setting. And my understanding is it probably would be in the public domain already by now anyway. But because he allowed it from the get-go, that's actually part of the reason why that setting became as popular as it has been, because there's been a lot of very talented writers over the years that have unironically written using those characters and the deep ones, the dark, the far ones, all the mythology that he created. So that was actually, he kind of unintentionally set himself up for some level of greatness because he was willing to share his stories with others. Every person is complicated. That's why as writers, we don't like to write mustache twirling villains, because they're just not interesting, and the people in real life are not like that. There's always some sort of humanity, even if it's just the vestiges of it. There's some sort of redeeming qualities to people, and I feel like a good writer will try to seek those out when possible, and that makes even the villains more interesting.
Bonus question. I understand you were a Magic the Gathering champion. Tell us a little bit about that.
So when I was young, what I did is I played this trading card game, Magic the Gathering, for a living. And for about a period of about 5 to 7 years, I primarily just traveled around the world and played cards for money. And by that, I don't mean playing poker. I mean entering championships and playing in these tournaments. And at one point, I tabulated that I've played Magic in approximately 30 countries. At one point, I was ranked third in the world. And I have finished in the top 8, which is kind of like the championship level, of 21 Grand Prix championships. So, which was a world record at the time. And I held that record for almost 10 years after I quit playing, until finally a number of people that continued to play, that were still playing back when I was playing, finally caught up to me. And but I think I'm still in the top 10. I'm not sure exactly where in the top 10, but I'm still in the top 10 for those championship top 8s.
So when you walk into a room of Magic the Gathering players, do they sort of stand up and bow in your direction and that sort of thing?
I mean, they totally should. Most of the time they fail to do so, probably because most of them were in their diapers back when I was doing that, and so they don't remember. But it's definitely enjoyable, and every once in a while I do get that reaction. It's like, are you the same Alex Shvartsman that used to play? So yeah, there are still people that occasionally that I remember, and I'm still in touch. I've made like any hobby that you partake in, you tend to make lifelong friends, and I'm still friends with many of the people that were on the Pro Tour and Grand Prix circuit with me back in those days, and we're talking about like mid to late 90s.
What's the best way for our audience to get a copy of Dreidel of Dread and keep up with what you're doing?
Everything, all of my short stories, my novels, everything else is linked at my official site, which is alexshvartsman.com, just like my name that appears in the corner of the screen. And the book itself is available on Amazon, Walmart, eBay, various bookstores, and of course, you can just go to the website and order directly from us, so that way we don't have to give Jeff Bezos his cut of the money. But really, I'm less concerned with where people get it. I would rather that they got the book and they enjoyed the artwork and the story, and hopefully derive some pleasure from it.
Well, Alex, thanks so much for joining us.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me and for hosting this program and bringing amusing people on to share our passions.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.